Hello, I'm Robert Pate. I'm a retired USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service soil scientist for Southern West Virginia. I've been down in Southern West Virginia about 30 years now. You know, this is the Greenbrier River. It's a beautiful river here in West Virginia, and you have basically a first bottom alluvial soil. And if you look where all the buildings are up top, that is a river terrace. The Greenbrier River, maybe, I don't know, 200,000–300,000 years ago, used to be that high, and it has eroded this far over geologic time, and we can still see hints of the river alluvium, because you're looking for rounded river cobbles, right? If you're up on a mountain, you're not going to find rounded river cobbles. But if you just look around and pay attention, and we'll go up there and do that here in a minute, you'll be able to see hints of, you know, the past geologic record. Now, if you're a Native American and you were living in this landscape, where would you camp? Would you camp right down by the river? No, you might get flooded out. You camp away from the river, up high out of the floodplain, and that's where you be lucky enough to find some arrowheads or some remnants of Native American heritage up there. One thing about moving water is that it sorts particle sizes, and it's very easy to see how the river will sort particle sizes. You see the gravel bar, all similar particle size. If you look here a little higher after the gravel drops out, you get a flood water, you'll get pure sand particle size. See how sorted all the same particle size drops out. And then further on, you're going to get the silt drop out, and then you're going to get the clay drop out later. According to Stokes' law, you can scientifically identify the particle size class based on the rate of drop through water. So you can, in the lab, you can scientifically identify particle size based on velocity of drop. There's so much life, so much biology going on in the soil. They say if you took an acre of soil, acre of topsoil, and you sieved out all the life, all the earthworms, all the invertebrates, you have about 1,000-pound steer. So if you have 1,000-pound steer grazing on an acre of ground, there's that much life within the top 6 inches of topsoil.
What's the tool that you're using, Rob?
This is called a Dutch auger. It has a closed tip instead of an open tip, so it can push rocks out of the way and still get a soil sample. You can feel that fine sand. There's a lot of fine sand in here. We hadn't really got to the silt, but the gravel dropped out, and then the coarse sand, and then you got the fine sand, and you can, even if you hold it up, you can hear that sand grittiness. And there's some soil scientists I know, they'll even put a little bit in their mouth. Just to show off, say they can put texture with it.
Don't try this at home, y'all.
Mottles are oxidized color changes. What happens is when the water table gets high, the reds and yellows lose their oxygen. You have iron oxides, red and yellow iron oxides. And what happens is, basically, the microorganisms in the soil is so full of life that all the microorganisms, they can't breathe, right? So where do they get oxygen when the water table's up? They take it off the FeO2, and they use it. And the FeO2, the iron floats away off the soil particles and leaves a gray soil matrix. And so you have white and grays instead of the bright yellows and reds from well oxidized soil. So it's really interesting. It's all based on soil biology. You can see how a well-drained soil, if you let the sun hit that, you can see the difference between a well-drained soil with all the iron oxides and a poorly drained soil where the microorganisms have used oxygen and taken away the oxygen out of the iron oxides and redeposited it in different areas. But that's called a glean or MOTTLES.
Wow, there's all different colors in there, and this looks more uniform in color, this one.
This is a well-drained, highly oxidated soil. You can tell this is a wet soil and have a high water table, so that can help on all your interpretations. You know, if you're building a house or putting in a septic field, you want to look at your soil type and see what to expect. If you're planting a crop, you know, what grows. A lot of crops won't grow well in a wet soil. It shows percentages of sand, silt, and clay. So you got percentages of clay, percentages of silt, and percentages of sand. And where those intersect is your texture. So for example, if you have a 50% sand, 30% clay, and 20% silt, it all intersects in a sandy clay loam. And these lines just aren't arbitrary lines. They show physical properties of the soil, of that texture. If you get enough experience, you can identify the texture just by feel in your hand. Like for example, this is what we call a ribbon. And usually if you get 27% clay, which is this line right here, clay is horizontal, it will ribbon down to your last knuckle. So this doesn't quite ribbon, so this is less than 27% clay. So you know it's below this line, and there's a lot of silt in here, so this texture is right here between a silt loam and a loam. If you find two of the textures, if you find percent clay and percent sand, you'll have your texture, because then you'll know your silt. But what we do a lot of times, if you can, just like you're panning for gold, if you can wash out the silt and the clay, have a water bottle. If you can wash out the silt and the clay and leave whatever sand's available, you know, a lot of times you have to wash it a few times. We'll do it back in the truck, but feel that right there. All you're left with is sand, and you can estimate the sand percentage just by feel. And so, I mean, I'm going to guess sand, you know, it's right in like 35%, so we're kind of just right in here between a loam and a silt loam.
Wow.
If you're in West Virginia, you're basically looking at three parent materials. You're looking at alluvial, colluvial, and residual. Okay, alluvial we looked at. Residual is weathered in place bedrock. And colluvium is the key. If you can understand colluvium, you'll understand a lot what's going on with the soil types. Colluvium is soil material that has moved once already. So for example, we looked at alluvial. We got residual bedrock up here. Look, you've got cactus growing. You've got shale bedrock.
Oh yeah, we got a lot of shale at home.
This is residual bedrock. Okay, this is, by the way, this is Mauchunk geology. Here you've got material, talus slope material, right? This is basically moved once already. See, you don't have the bedrock. Okay, it's moved once. Okay, it's got disoriented rock fragments, all different directions. Up here you have bedded bedrock. This is very important if you're like building a house, if you're building a road, if you're an engineer. Okay, say your road's down here like it is a lot of times right along the alluvial floodplain. You want to buy a lot, you want to build a house. Well, you cut out the hill, you build a house right here. What's going to happen next time it rains? Boom, this hill's going to already moved once, it's going to boom right down on top of your house. Where do you want to build a road? You're going to come up here above the colluvium where it's firmer, where it hasn't moved already, and build your road where it's a lot more stable. That's why in this real red clay country, you see all these road slips, because they built it in colluvium. They cut the toe out of the soak of the colluvium, and it all just keeps slipping downhill because it's already moved once. Clay.
So this is the sand,
This
is it?
Sand.
Okay. And then the silt is this
And then
one.
the silt, and then the clay.
Okay.
And we're going to do a little experiment. We got the sand in here. And we're going to add some silt. It's a lot easier if you break it up, but
And just plain old water in there, huh?
plain old water. A lot of times they add, is it Calgon, like a water softener to disperse the particles. And then you'll have some clay, but the clay is hard to break up, so you know, if you do this experiment with just a subsoil or topsoil, it's hard to do topsoil because everything's black. But if you do the subsoil, you want to break everything up and let it sit a couple of days so it all disperses well. A lot of times, if you have clay, especially if it gets dry, the clay will hold all the sand within it, so you have to disperse it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do it, the sand will drop out immediately. The silt, it'll be about 2 hours before the silt layer forms, and then it'll be about 24 before the clay finally falls out.
Mm.
So that sand's done.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And here in a couple hours, there'll be a layer here that forms silt. And then the fine clay will drop out and form a third layer, a very distinctive layer, and then you'll have clear water.
This is something folks can do in their backyard if they want, can they?
Yes.
Even if you just have one soil type in your...
Well, see, one soil type is a mixture of all those particles.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, if you dry it out, the best thing to do is to kind of dry it out and crush it real good, and then put it back in the water. And we'll do that again and watch this sand drop out. Ready?
Yeah.
And they're
Closer.
coming.
Okay. So the sand particles are the largest particles.
Yes.
Wow. It almost is kind of like sand art, where you have the colored
Yes.
sand in a bottle. Different layers.
It is. What I wanted to show you was the Munsell's color chart. Okay, every color has a scientific number to it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you can say red, yellow, blue, brown, but if you look at, just like artists, if you look at hue, value, and chroma in the art world, if you look at hue, value, and chroma, that can scientifically identify the soil colors, and that's how we describe soil colors. We'll take this color.
It almost looks like paint samples.
It is paint samples, exactly what artists use, or sometimes botanists use them, biologists use them to do green colors. We'll look at these models here. We try to match them up. And that's pretty close. I mean, that's a
yeah, I can see that.
Tenoir 6.2. But the way you describe this, you'd say, you'd say 80% Tenoir 6.2, 15% 7.5 wire. You'd get the color of the actual iron 4.4, and a couple percentages of, a lot of times you get manganese concretions when it's real wet. And some of these wetland soils, they get what they call glade, which they're actually turned blue. And there's some blue colors on here. I think I have a chart in here for blue colors.
Oh, wow.
These are glade. They have a little different chemistry, but some of these, I've seen blue soils that are just beautiful. If you've ever seen a blue soil. And you get in these wet blue glade soils, the red crawdads will take on this color and they'll be bright blue.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen bright blue crawdads digging holes come out bright blue.
Yeah, and this is the time that they're emerging. Like you'll see that they're piles in the floodplain.
Yeah, those are crotavinas, they call them. Animal crotavinas coming up on the soil. So there's a lot of life in soil.
This is just amazing to see here one more time that they've settled out. You can see the layer here of sand at the bottom, and then the silt here is already, it's only been less than 10 minutes settled out, and you can start to see a thin layer of clay settling out, but that'll take some more time, won't it?
Take another day or so. Now a lot of this, this might actually be coarse sand, fine sand, silt. There might be even very fine sand. It might actually classify as a particle size of sand. But you can definitely see how the idea of the settling velocity is based exclusively on the particle size. We're up on the river terrace now, and you can see how much lower it is than the rest of the mountain. You can see the creek. The creek used to be up here hundreds of thousands of years ago and deposited this alluvial material. And how do you know it's alluvial? Well, look in the dirt pile here. You've got rounded gravels, rounded rock fragments put here by the river many, many years ago. Like we were talking about, the bedrock is angular geology. The rocks come off angular. After it moves down the slope a little bit, it will knock off the edges. But you get on the river, and they round each other, and they turn into rounded gravels. So this is definitely put here by water. Kind of just like the gravel bar we found right by the river down there before.
And it's amazing just seeing this here in construction dirt pile.
Right, you can see so much. Right now I'm looking for airhead chips, flint chips, because this is where the Indians would stay. They stay up top here and camp. Maybe even have a little garden. The Indians had corn and squash, and they stayed up here and they napped their airheads. Type is a pretty unique soil type. It's moderately well drained. It has what they call a fragipan, and it's called Monongahela silt loam. Monongahela in Native American was high cliffs, high bluffs, and it was near some high bluffs. And Monongahela is the official state soil of West Virginia, just like sugar maple is the state tree, rhododendron is the state flower. Monongahela is West Virginia's official state soil.